Today we are at the Walnut Grove Plantation. Now this isn't the Walnut Grove of Laura Ingalls Wilder and the Little House on the Prairie fame. No, this is the Walnut Grove Plantation in South Carolina. It's probably about 5 miles, maybe 10 miles south of Spartanburg, and it's out in the country. We've never been here before, and we've never seen any of this before, so you and I are going to experience this together for the first time.
Charles and Mary Moore were among the first British colonists to come and settle in upstate South Carolina.
It's believed to have been built about 1765, and it's a style known as a Piedmont farmhouse. And originally this house was one big room with a low roof with a loft, and it would have had no glass windows. It would have only had shutters. The house is made of logs, and inside you'll see in the dining room. People think it was original, but our director actually found a receipt. The wavy glass was bought from Japan in 1967. This fireplace, it's believed to be original to the house. It started collapsing, and it's shored up. It's going to be rebuilt, and the mortar in the chimney's going to be repointed. And so this overmantel actually went over the fireplace, and there was one just like it in the bedroom there, but when they took it down to check that fireplace, it just crumbled.
Look how thin this wall is.
So,
Most of what you see there is trim.
but now this, you can see the original log. And you see the dovetails in the corner.
I want to point out real quick the windows there. It's hard to see because of all the light, but look at that glass. So that glass came from Japan, you said, in the 1960s?
I believe so. That's what I was told.
Interesting. The wood here in this door is interesting because this looks like it was
Painted.
like hand grained.
And apparently the man, Buck Buchanan, who was instrumental in the restoration of Walnut Grove, I think he is the one who did the grain painting in the 60s. He was an artist to make it look like
A more expensive wood than what they
which
actually
would have been
had.
something they would have done at the time anyway.
Yeah.
But it's kind of like he was so good at what he did that a lot of the stuff they didn't know what he did and what was original to the house. This blue door here under the closet, it's been repainted, but before it was repainted, they tested the paint, and it dated to the 1850s when Anna and Samuel moved in. So they believe that that's at the time she did a lot of the redecorating, painting, maybe added some of the fancy woodwork.
So as you can tell, this house has a ton of history to it. Unfortunately, historic structures usually have to suffer over the ravages of time, and this one is no different. And they've undergone a program of restoration here. So a lot of the wood was rotten. This is restoration wood here, which is very similar to what was original. So we're told that the windows originally did not have glass in here. Now, can you imagine spending the winter in a house with no glass windows? I bet it was mighty cold.
So this, even though it's standing in for our kitchen, this was actually someone's family home. They raised children here. And it was donated and moved here in the 60s. It's also Piedmont farmhouse style. You can see the sleeping loft, and there's a staircase that's tiny and scary, just like the one in my grandparents' house. And the beds that used to be upstairs were all rug beds. The one downstairs is not. This was a trundle bed that would have gone under the bigger bed to, for the small children to sleep in at night, and you'd push it away. The women of the family would have cooked, and later probably they would have supervised enslaved people. Because they had such a small number of enslaved people, they were probably working right alongside them, supervising. It wasn't a case of Mrs. Moore and her daughters sitting on the porch fanning themselves while the enslaved people worked. Because this was very much a backcountry farm in the beginning. It wasn't, even though they were relatively wealthy, it wasn't like you think of plantations from the 1700s down at the coast. It was a real everybody working together.
Now the walls, are they sealed with clay?
I believe they are. This house was, unlike the manor house, this house was, I think, originally just a log cabin. I know it's got siding on now, but I think that it was originally a log cabin that was chinked. They also have the loom, and in better times there was a lady who demonstrated. I don't know how to use the loom. I wish I did.
This is the smokehouse. The diet of the 18th century colonists relied heavily on pork, and smoking was an excellent way to keep the meat from spoiling. This is what it looks like inside. Would they just put a fire in the middle of it?
I think so. They just put a fire there and then let the heat and the smoke would cure the meats.
Okay, that
But,
makes sense.
Yeah, they would just hang it up here, and I think they used a salt brine too.
Yeah, salt brine and herbs.
Over there's a meat grinder over there in the corner. This little cabin here represents the grist mill. They have a couple of gears, and there are stones, and so you would take your wheat, put it in there, and then turn it, and the weight of the stones would grind against it and make a powder, which we know is wheat flour. There's also a nice collection of broad axes there and felling axes. Now, we talked about, in our 1834 house, we talked about the hand-hewn beams down in the basement several episodes back. And those axes right there, particularly maybe the broad axe in the middle, that's how they would square off the timbers and make them square instead of round. And in fact, if you look over there in the corner, on some of those beams, you can actually see the chop marks.
This is believed to be the original dry cellar for this plantation that was dug over 200 years ago, reinforced with the stone walls. The building above it was reconstructed in 1968 with old 18th century dry lumber. This is the well the family used for both drinking and washing. It is 30 feet deep, and the inside, it says, is lined with stone. This is the blacksmith shop, and it was actually one of the original buildings on this property. The barn. It's really muddy. Mm-hmm. You're gonna slip in that gunk.
I almost walked in that.
Yeah.
In most of these old cabins, the walls have chinking in them to keep the air from flowing through and preserve the heat that's inside for the humans that live there. But this is a barn, and cows and horses need air circulation, and so the barns typically didn't have chinking in them.
There's several yellow flags you can see all along here, and this is thought to be where the slave quarters might have been. They're hoping to do an archaeological dig sometime in the near future. This is the doctor's office. Their 9th child, their 2nd son of Charles and Mary Moore, was a doctor. This was his office. Not very big, but it did the job.
This is the cemetery that the guide was talking about. It sits down here under this grove of trees. Now, in the summertime, these trees are all leafed out, and it is probably a really amazing space to be in. Unfortunately, there's a freeway over there making a lot of noise, but otherwise, the sense of history here is incredible. The soldiers who were killed here is what got this cemetery started. So they buried those 3 soldiers here, and over time, they started burying more people from the surrounding area. We have one here that's 1733 to 1805.
Andrew Barry Moore, 1771 to 1848. Charles and Mary's 9th child, the county's first doctor. Their 7th child, Thomas Moore, died in 1822.
The Walnut Grove Plantation in upstate South Carolina. This place is an amazingly preserved, original, colonial era plantation from back in the 1700s. You got to come and check it out yourselves. A lot of things that we did see, we didn't show on camera.